Hi everyone, welcome back. How's it going? Today I'm going to talk about the 1984 film Firestarter. You can see the classic poster there with Drew Barrymore on the cover. This is, of course, an adaptation of the Stephen King novel from 1981. Have a copy of the novel right here, which I read a few years ago. It's been a while since I've read the book, but remember this being a case of maybe the book being a little better than the movie, but like I said, it's been a while. But really by 1984, we're really getting into peak Stephen King era where we're getting two or three, a couple adaptations every year. We're getting TV adaptations. So his influence on pop culture is really hitting fever pitch by the mid 1980s, and Firestarter is just part of that wave of early Stephen King adaptations that we're getting so much of. And I do like this movie. It does have a few issues here and there, but I'll talk about those. I'll get into those, but anyway, a little bit on the pre-production of this film. Now, this was originally going to be a John Carpenter movie. John Carpenter, another name who comes up all the time in 1984. But when The Thing did not do well at the box office in 1982, Universal took Carpenter off the project, and a different director was brought in, Mark L. Lester, a journeyman director, probably most famous known for making Commando, the Schwarzenegger action film. But Carpenter did fine. I mean, he would do Christine, really good Stephen King film, and Starman, which I just talked about. So it's all good. I'm sure that Carpenter script, well, Bill Lancaster, who wrote The Thing, also wrote the early script for Firestarter, which I've read was a lot different from the book, and also there was one big change I'll get to later. And I really do think the movie we got in 84 followed the book pretty closely. Like there was, it really followed the structure of the book and a little bit about the story. So we have Charlie, played by Drew Barrymore, and she is a young child, 9 years old, and she has the ability to start fires. And when we start out the film, David Keith, who plays her father, and they are on the run from the government. And like the book, the movie has a flashback structure, at least for the first half, where we learn about the origins, where David Keith and Heather Locklear plays Charlie's mom. And they were part of an experiment in the 70s where colleges were doing experiments with psychedelics, and they took part in these experiments. And some of the people, the name of the drug was Lot 6, the name of the drug, and some of the people who took the drug developed psychic abilities, telekinetic powers, and they were able to, they were changed forever. And I know the book gets a lot more into the other patients and what they went through with all of this. So anyway, when they have their child, and they get married, Heather Locklear and David Keith, and Charlie is their child, and like I said, she has the ability to start fires, and we can see it's very dangerous. And one thing I noticed watching the film this time is that there's fire extinguishers in every room in the house. At one point, she accidentally sets her mom's hands on fire, so it's very dangerous, and she doesn't seem able to control it, right? Meanwhile, they are being harassed by the government, who want to bring Charlie in so they can study her. And this is where what's called the shop comes into play, which is part of other Stephen King novels. And the shop is like an offshoot of the CIA, and they do top secret projects involving fantastical or supernatural things, and they're usually nefarious, right? And they definitely are in this movie, where they're after Charlie. At one point, not to spoil, a little bit of a spoiler, where Heather Locklear is killed by government agents, and that's why she has to go on the run with David Keith as her father. David Keith is really good in this movie. He's a little messed up himself, her father, because he also has telekinetic abilities that he has trouble controlling, and he can also do real harm to people. So that first half of the movie is really strong when they're on the run. Eventually, at one point, they're taken in by Art Carney, who was a farmer, and his wife take in Charlie and her dad, but eventually the shop catches up with them, and they're taken to this facility, which I don't remember what it was like in the book, but in the movie, it's like almost like this bed and breakfast type place, this old mansion. I know it was filmed in North Carolina, this old southern mansion where, all these experiments are going on. So they capture Charlie and Martin Sheen, who is sort of like the head of the shop, or this wing of it anyway. And then we have George C. Scott, who plays John Rainwater, who is an extractor, who does really, really awful things for the government, and he is the one who eventually captures them. And while at the shop, he tries to befriend Charlie, become like a father figure to her, and I'll have more to say about that. Meanwhile, they are testing her abilities, and they're just blown away by what she can do. At one point, one of the doctors says, like, they're worried that, like, she could, like, she could become like a human atomic bomb, where she could just have incredible power, like she becomes like a weapon of mass destruction in her. So they're worried about that, and they're awed by what she can do and everything, and terrified of it. And eventually her father's still there, and it becomes like they want to escape. They're separated though, and the movie moves towards a conclusion that is very similar to Carrie, right? If you know how Carrie ends, which also deals with telekinesis, although they're different stories, because Carrie was more about bullying and high school culture and religious fanaticism, and Firestarter is really about paranoia and Cold War, post-60s themes. So they're different, but both involve telekinesis. Like, George C. Scott in this movie gives a really creepy performance, because it is suggested in the film that he's grooming Charlie for, like he says something like, someday we will be together forever. So it's really creepy, his scenes, what he's trying to do and win her confidence, and like trying to turn her against her father and everything. Now, one of the differences in the Carpenter version was, like, that character was going to be a woman, okay, and I thought that would have been a more interesting dynamic, making it like a mother-daughter relationship, because her mother had been killed earlier, so that might have had more possibilities. But so much of the second half of the movie is just creepy old George C. Scott with Drew Barrymore, and it gets a little much. Like, we get a little too many scenes, I think, of them, and the fast-paced action of the first half kind of gives way to this psychological drama happening in the second half of the film. So that would be one thing that maybe doesn't work in his favor so well. But the climax is pretty fantastic, though. The special effects are great, and so we do get a really bombastic ending to the film. So, as I just mentioned, like, I think the themes in the story of paranoia about the government, like coming out of the post-60s, where paranoia about drugs, like, some of this is based on fact. The MK Ultra programs, which they were, doing experiments on American citizens and seeing what psychedelics could do, and government agencies did have a big interest in psychedelic drugs, and King is really, in the movie's really riffing on that idea, but also I think the Cold War theme of military and science working together, and for nefarious purposes, and even taking children away, and using the government using people's gifts and talents for to do awful things, right? Like, so it's yeah, very very etched in that Cold War mentality. Like I said, so flaws and all, I do enjoy the movie. It does overall work. Like I said, a few caveats with it. It's just so much. I think we're getting so much Stephen King, like Children of the Corn and Cujo and The Dead Zone. Martin Sheen playing a very similar character that he did in The Dead Zone in this film. So Firestarter is just so much a part of a piece with those other adaptations that were being made at the time, which gives the film, I think, a nice retro quality to it, I guess, for lack of a better term. I should mention there's a score by Tangerine Dream, a great synth score, and I think that adds a lot of a layer of unease to the movie, and that really works well. And I think the TV show Stranger Things took a lot from Firestarter. And if you watch some parts of this movie, it feels like you're watching Stranger Things. So no doubt this has had a lot of influence on this story. And like I said, my memory of the novel, like there's a lot more depth in the book, and we learned a lot more about the shop and about what they're doing, what they're all about, and I think the father-daughter relationship. The film does a good job of that in the first half, but the book, that's really the heart of the book is Charlie's a relationship with her father. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Firestarter, and don't think I have anything else I wanted to say. No, I think that's it. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'll be back to talk about some more films from the 1980s, kind of focused on the year 1984 right now. So, all right, have a good day.